All right, y'all, welcome back. We are here in the shop again working on this Z-swapped FCRX7 project that I've got going on. If you could, please like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate all the love. Now, what we're going to be doing today is installing some Xcessive subframe spacers. Now, what these do is they just go in between the frame and the subframe of the car, and they basically just drop the subframe down about an inch. This will give me the ability to mount the engine just a little bit lower down there in the chassis, allowing me to get a little bit closer back to the firewall and get me off of this brake booster here. Now, in the RX-7, the rear differential is actually kicked over towards the passenger side about an inch. So another thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to actually be setting the engine over to the passenger side just about an inch. This will help a little bit with weight distribution when I'm actually sitting in the car, and this will align the engine up with that rear differential so that my drive shaft doesn't try to bind up on me. An added benefit to these subframe spacers is that I'll be able to mount my engine a little bit lower down in the engine bay. This will give me a lower center of gravity, but it also means that my hood will be less likely to make contact with the engine whenever I try to close it, meaning I won't have to cut my hood. So all these subframe spacers do is they just sit right here in between the subframe and the frame of the car. All you got to do is drop your subframe down, put the subframe spacers in place, and then bolt your subframe back up. That's all there is to it. It's a really simple process, so let's get it started, y'all. All right, y'all, now that we got that big old engine out of our way, now we can go ahead and drop our subframe. Now, these subframes are just held up by 421mm nuts. And once you take those off, the subframe's ready to come down. You don't have to take anything else off in order to do this. All right, y'all. Now, once you've got your subframe loose, you can go ahead and pry it away from the frame. Now, you don't have to worry about taking all the rest of your suspension stuff loose. Your suspension will actually hold it up in the air. That way, you don't have to drop your subframe all the way. Unless you plan on painting it or something like that, there ain't no sense in doing all that work, honey. Don't do that to yourself. All right, y'all, once you get your subframe out of the way, now we need to focus on getting these factory mounting bolts out. Now, these bolts run all the way through the frame, and they're tack welded to the top of it, okay? So you're going to have to bust those welds loose. Now, the method I used here was to drill a pilot hole, and then I used a hole saw around the outside edges of them to bust through that weld. Now, I did have an angle grinder and a cutoff wheel, but I really didn't want to damage my frame, but on the driver's side, I wound up going that route because this was such a pain in the butt to do it this way, and it just wasn't intelligent, so don't do this, okay? Now, once you get your welds busted loose, you need to get underneath the car and put a nut on the bottom side of that bolt and get yourself a hammer and start beating on it and beating on it and beating on it. And believe me, once you think you've beat on it enough, you ain't beat on it hard enough. These things are a pain in the butt, and believe you me, I know what that feels like, okay? Now, what I wound up doing to get some of these bolts out was I would use my jack and I would put pressure on the bottom side of the bolt, and then I would get a chisel and a big hammer and I would hammer underneath the head of it until it finally busted loose, and I had to use PB Blaster and all other kinds of mess to get them out of here. They are the hardest part of this job. And believe me, honey, it was hot that day too, y'all. I was sweating like a whore in church over there. Now we got this second one out of here, and look at how damn nasty that bolt is. Y'all see all that gross stuff on the side of it? But yeah, once we get those out of the way, we're going to go ahead and come through here, and we're going to clean up these frame rails, and I'm going to wind up putting me some fresh undercoat on there, but first I got to get all this gunk off of here. All right, y'all, now we got this frame rail nice and cleaned up. We got the old welds ground down, and I went ahead and cleaned up this wheel arch a little bit so that it looks presentable, but we're going to go ahead and get some undercoat put on there. And would you look at how much nicer that looks? Now, I didn't worry about taping it off. I wasn't that worried about it. I do plan on painting this engine bay at some point. But now it's time to move on to the driver's side, okay? And like I said, to get those bolts out, I wound up using the cutoff wheel on this side, honey. I wasn't fixing to struggle like I did on that other side. That was just too much damn work. I wound up burning up bits and all other mess. All right, y'all, now that we've got our driver's side painted, we've got our new hardware in, it's time to get these spacers installed. Now, I wasn't really happy with the size of washers that came with the kit, so I went up to Ace Hardware and I got me some bigger washers to put underneath my bolts. And I decided to go with some nylon locking nuts as well. Now, these are our spacers. This is my front one. Basically, these are just a 1-inch chunk of aluminum, like I said before, and they just sit right down here on top of this subframe, just like that right there. Let me get a better close-up for you right there. And now this is our rear one. Now this has got a little alignment pin, and it lines up with this little dowel on the subframe right there. And then the kit comes with a new dowel pin that replaces the one that was lost. That way your subframe goes up nice and straight, unlike somebody else we know. All right, y'all, once we have our spacers in place, all we have to do is line the subframe back up and lift it up in the air, and then tighten our bolts down. It's really simple, and unfortunately, I didn't film that part, so we're just going to skip ahead with the power of editing magic. And poof, just like that, we're done. Now, as you can see, we've got a little bit less clearance between the engine and the firewall, and we still got a decent amount of clearance between our valve cover and our brake booster. Now, previously, when we were test fitting our engine, we were trying to get it to sit as low as possible, but it was rubbing on the steering rack, and our oil pan was sitting lower than our subframe. But as you can see now, it's sitting level with, if not a little bit higher than the subframe, meaning that it's in a lot less danger of being ruptured if we ever hit something. Well, all right, y'all, now that we got our engine sitting where we want to, the next thing on our list is to get engine mounts and a transmission mount made. But this is all from me today, honey. All right, y'all, please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time, all right? Bye-bye.